Fear. It stands among the pinnacle of things we can feel in this world. It is, in its very essence, something that connects all life, primal and primitive. Whether you're a man, child, or wild beast, to be alive means to share this innate feeling of unease and panic at that which is paranormal. And in the minds of us ever-imaginative humans, we've managed to brew up countless of our own deepest, darkest nightmares. The polar opposites of our heroes from legend, and just as boundless in number. So today, to celebrate the holiday of candy corn and pumpkin spice, we'll look at 13 of these avatars of evil and rank how powerful humanity's collective embodiments of fear can stack up to one another. Now, if you're ready for an absolute bloodbath, smash that subscribe button for me, get yourself a nice cold drink, and let's start with a few ground rules. The first is pretty simple. That'll be that we're ranking 13 of these characters by their holistic combat ability. And as you might guess, in the clash of paranormal, some of these characters will be literal ethereal demon people, while others will just be guys with knives. A lot of guys with knives on this list. So just keep in mind, this isn't an arm wrestling competition. We are ranking them by their ability to do damage and fight other monster people to the death. And as for the second and final rule, many of these characters have suffered through reboot after rewrite over the years they've existed, and for the sake of this video, we'll mostly be using their original canon unless mentioned otherwise. That all in mind now, let's help you get an idea of how this list is going to work with our very first placement. Michael Myers. Now, for Michael, the shape of Halloween night is a perfect representation of a middle-of-the-road villain for this list. He's got 4 separate timelines and a legacy that stretches back over 40 long years. Consistently though, Myers is a slow-moving human with an insane proficiency for stealth and taking loads of damage. In every continuity, he's managed to walk off gun wounds and casually overpower humans, while in some, like in the original timeline, he's powered by an immortal cultish curse that makes him functionally unkillable. Consistently though, while Michael is pretty strong, fast, and resilient, his showings are so much more grounded than most. Despite the fact that almost no one can fully kill the boogeyman, the best I can do for him is low C tier. But with some sort of scope for what the middle of the list looks like now, how does one of our more human individuals perform? Such as the many Ghostfaces. In this case, the iconic villain will just get 1 slot since, in a quick spoiler, it does not really matter which one you pick from the lineup or what tools you give them, because this slasher parody villain is, at the end of the day, just a spooky looking regular dude or dudette. And compared to someone like Michael from before, who is walking out of exploding buildings and taking on entire firing squads, the difference is night and day. So for Ghostface and all of the regular human characters who didn't make it on this list, like Norman Bates, Jigsaw, or Jack from The Shining, F tier is where you'd go. And now that we've been awfully mean to poor Ghostface, let's bully Michael for a bit instead to show you what a more mystical entity of evil can do. The Candyman. And since we don't play around here, that's the last time you'll be hearing his name in the video. But yes, the titular hook-handed bee-loving man is basically the equivalent of some sort of cursed spirit out for vengeance. So in effect, he's got a lot of the same powers as Michael, near immortality, regeneration, super strength, and stealth, but unlike John Carpenter's classic though, he's got actual superpowers, such as controlling bees, and when I say bees, I mean a lot of freaking bees. He's covered the entire city of Chicago in bees, which is already scary enough, but ignoring that fact, he can also do things like levitate, teleport, or mind control. If it wasn't for the fact that his soul exists within objects on Earth, he can disappear and be defeated from being forgotten, and he's deathly weak to fire. He'd likely rank a little higher, but the best I can do for our first genuinely supernatural threat, even with those weaknesses, he's high B tier. Assuming you've got the hang of this now though, let's fill out some of these tiers a bit more so we can finally get to the real heavy hitters of horror. So, speed round inbound. Ready? Go. Chucky. Guys, he's just an angry doll. Burn the cotton, break the plastic, throw it in the trash, doom the environment. Easy F tier. I think you, yes, this person watching the video right now, you could beat him in a fight. Frankenstein's monster. He's just a really angry doll, but big this time. Really big. He is swifter than a flying eagle and capable of disarming a fully grown man in a very literal sense. Considering he can also swim the English Channel and climb the Alps with his bare hands on top of being surprisingly smart, I'd say Frankie here can also place nicely into the higher ends of C tier. Leatherface, the exact opposite of Ghostface in every way. He's not too bright or exceptionally cunning, but he has a chainsaw and a very simple goal: use it. He's survived many bullet wounds, hacked through entire cars, and has super stats, but unfortunately lacks a bit in the healing and skill categories, so D tier is unfortunately where he'll be forced to be. Samara Morgan or Sadako Yamamura. Whether it's the Japanese or American Ring films, this Spectre is incredibly strong, with the power to handle almost anyone with her curse, and the intangibility to make most people useless against her. On top of the fact that in her Japanese sequel, she fused with the other demon lady from The Grudge, and I obviously can't give that version, Sadakaya, any lower placement than our very first A tier. Count Dracula, the original horror time big bad, and in effect one of the strongest among them, because in his original novel he's described to have the strength of 20 men, as well as being impervious to any weapon conceived before 1897. Couple this with his mind hacks, transformation into things like bats, wolves, and mist, then it just wouldn't make any sense at all to have him as low as C tier. But when your powers are negated by garlic, looking at the cross, wounds through the heart, roses on top of coffins, sacred pew-pews, drowning him, mountain ash, and oh yeah, you know, the entire sun, you can't really expect him to be above C tier anymore, now can you? And one last big bad for the speed round, William Afton. No spoilers for the movie here, I promise, I haven't even seen it myself yet, but with a resilient robo-bunny suit, decent use of weapons like Ghostface, and super strength likely coming from that suit, he's just a better Ghostface, so low D tier it is. Now that we've really filled up this list though, I'm sure you can see that very blank, very vacant S tier slot. So, as I promised, I've got a few more characters for you who are among the horror genre's heaviest hitters. And I think, since you've all waited along with me so nicely, it's time to fill out another member of the slasher genre trinity. Freddy Krueger. Now Freddy is in a lot of ways one of the scariest and most powerful beings on this list because Freddy is a spiritual entity. He's not something you can just see coming or predict. He is the very embodiment of your own deepest fears turned against you. And this is important because the more people who begin to associate Freddy with their deepest fears, the more powerful he becomes, as he channels the collective fear felt toward him into his power, which is the manipulation and control of your dreams. Once asleep, he can invade your mind, observe your most traumatic memories, and turn them all into your perfect nightmare, in which anything that happens to you will happen in real life. And unlike most of these horror entities, from Michael to Ghostface and even Bunnyman here, Freddy hasn't been afraid to, or legally obligated against, throwing hands with many other horror icons. The biggest of these two being Ash William from Evil Dead and Jason Voorhees from Friday the 13th. But interestingly, Freddy actually receives multiple amps from these movies to negate his prior weaknesses and make him rank far higher on this list than he might have otherwise. The most obvious being that against Jason, the people of Camp Crystal Lake started to fear Freddy and learn his legend, causing Freddy to become far more powerful mid-fight. This is super significant because he became so much more powerful that he was about to begin using his dream powers and manipulation in the real world, which just days before, if he had been brought into, would make his dreamlike spiritual power set useless and his body far weaker. But now, following Freddy vs. Jason and his absorption of the Necronomicon in Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, which turned Freddy into an actual demonic dream god who could rewrite the whole actual world in his own image, if it just wasn't for his over-reliance on dream demons to provide his initial power, and the fact that his time with the Necronomicon is on the clock because of them, then he'd likely be even higher. But because he can lose all of his strength at any moment if the dream demons decide not to help him, or even if he's just forgotten about, then I'd have to rank Freddy near the top of A tier. To take a little detour here though, I'd like to include one of our only Stephen King characters on this list, and possibly one of the more interesting candidates to get her whole own section. Now, Carrie is a neat one on this list because, on the one hand, she has some of the most ferocious and gruesome powers on the whole list, but on the other, she's still just a normal teenage girl whose powers are tied to her anger. So with the pure unbridled rage of a teenage girl as our fuel source, you can probably see why it would end up a little inconsistent. However, when Carrie does manage to get her powers to work, she's very deadly. As a normal human going totally crazy compared to many of these strange monster people, she's relatively level-headed and can use her powers of telekinesis to brutalize whatever might be in her path, and the pure scale of her destruction is often mind-boggling, creating hailstorms of stone, destroying buildings, wiping out entire chunks of towns, and of course, flipping cars. At the peak of her suffering and shift to villainy, she was able to massacre a whole prom's worth of people, so it's not too unreasonable to say her kill count would also be on the higher side too. So while maybe not even as physically strong as someone like Michael, or as spiritually strong as someone like Freddy, the fact that she could and would in all likelihood shred apart half of this list with her mind if she got too angry, I have zero choice but to place her in the bottom of B tier only due to her inconsistency. But now, for the one I'm sure you've all been waiting for, the monster from the lagoon, the man in the mask, and of course, the once victim turned villain, Jason Voorhees. If you think of the phrase iconic slasher, you've probably been picturing this guy. And in all reality, he has been all over the board since his debut appearance in the second Friday film. But in his original continuity, as you could probably tell by all the subtle hype I've thrown around for him in this video, Jason is a nearly unstoppable monster. A boy who drowned, turning into a man who died, and then was resurrected as an immortal, all-powerful zombie demon deadite thing, who could clash one-on-one with an amped Freddy Krueger, come back from a place with double hockey sticks to match the mask, and of course, take Manhattan, baby. But even more so at the end of his timeline, Jason would go on to receive a complete genetic overhaul in Jason X, where his body was reconstructed into that of a zombie super soldier, making him capable of surviving stupid things like being blasted into space at near light speeds, fighting a clone of himself, and surviving an atom bomb point blank. Uber Jason, as we sometimes call him, was so ridiculous and broken that looking at all of his superhuman kill feats from the 9 movies prior literally wouldn't do him any justice, to the point where they basically had to reboot his whole franchise afterwards to make Jason drop back down to regular power levels. And considering he doesn't even really have any weaknesses to exploit by that point in the timeline, then for anyone who loves Camp Crystal Lake's #1 rep, I still can't bring myself to put him quite up there, so he lands the tippity top of A tier. But I'm sure by now I hear you asking, on God's green earth, if it's not Freddy, Jason, or Michael, or anyone in this video, who else could possibly deserve the fabled S tier placement? And in a bit of a cop-out, I'll just tell you plainly that any character involved with the Deadlights from Stephen King's The Dark Tower. For this example, it'll be Pennywise, but what I'm about to say can be applied to someone else like the Crimson King, should deserve that slot. As the funny-looking evil clown man from the It franchise is nothing more than a puppet, an avatar, if you will, for an extra-dimensional monster of eldritch horror, comprised entirely of these things called the Deadlights. They rob their victims of their mind and soul, leaving them immobile and lifeless after consuming what little bit of their existence was left remaining. And while they play a less significant role in the film adaptations, these lights are so uncontainable that they could exist anywhere at any time, to such an extent that even a tower connecting all the worlds in the King universe, a whole multiverse of ideas and horrors, could not contain a being like Pennywise, allowing him to be completely free to send his evil clown puppets to Earth and torment the population for nothing more than the sick joy of destruction. So, as a being capable of escaping the multiverse and torturing any of many, he could be anywhere at any time, even right behind you as we speak. So the best honor I can bestow him in the magnum opus of power in the Stephen King book series is S tier. If you enjoyed this video though and really want to see more content about these characters, I'm sure I did miss a few, from Pinhead to Annabelle and even Godzilla, I guess. So hit that subscribe button to let me know if you want to see a part 2 just as bad as I. Now be sure to have a happy Halloween, and that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.